also easily lean into that. It's got to be different. I've got to put my stamp on it. And what you have to remember, and what the 50% rule has reminded me, is that I have to springboard where we are to the next place. And if every single time I tear down the scaffolding and start from zero, I'm never going to get past the halfway point.
Hey, Nicole, what do you get when a former corporate CEO and a do-gooding executive walk into a recording studio?
Well, Aaron, nothing, because the two of us are usually on my couch or Zoom because wine.
You get a podcast created for Gen X women who are bought into the corporate world but fed up with the BS.
I know. It's how to thrive the 9 to 5 or 6 or 7.
It's career therapy. It's comedy. It's definitely full-on authenticity. Basically, we give you tangible strategies to rise in your career without compromising everything else.
Because work doesn't have to suck.
Hey guys, Erin here with another episode of Because Work Doesn't Have to Suck, where we help Gen X leaders who want to have a big career and they don't want to compromise to get there. And we help you with authentic tips, people bucking the norm, doing stuff differently, etc. And this week I have a guest. This is a little bit of a different episode. My guest is Michelle L. Gardner. Michelle is a senior supervising director of foundation relations for Binghamton University. Essentially, she puts it, she connects people and organizations who want to change the world with those who can. And the reason I asked Michelle to be on is that about a year and a half ago, when I started writing my second book, The 50% Rule, I knew I didn't want to do it in a vacuum. I didn't want to sit in my house by myself and write a book and think I had great ideas and then work with an editor to do it. I wanted to bring in a group of people earlier than I had with the first book to give me input, to test things out, to ideate around not just the book, but the launch. And I'm so glad I did. I had no idea what I was doing when I threw out that email about a year and a half ago asking for, I think I said something like 12 to 15 volunteers. And within hours, I had about 70 emails of volunteers. And Michelle was one of those. And I did not know Michelle before that. A friend of hers had read my book and apparently made like a coloring page out of one of her favorite quotes. She loved it so much. And Michelle sort of adopted the book and read it and jumped on the email list and joined the group. And I thought it would just be fun for you to hear a little inside scoop about a group that's been meeting with me for every month, the last Friday of every month, and talking about the book and how she sees the 50% rule, why she thinks people should read it. And it's not a commercial. It's just, an authentic conversation. We also talk about her profession and her unique approach, which is really inspiring. And this concept of using a personal brand of trust plus gratitude. And what does that tangibly mean? What are the stories where she puts that into action to make things happen that probably other people couldn't make happen? And so, yeah, it's just a fun little fly on the wall conversation with one of our 50% rulers, and talking about what it feels like to do things a little bit differently. So without further ado, here's my conversation with Michelle L. Gardner. So I thought first, I'd love to talk first about, you and your feelings about authenticity and what you do and how that sort of plays. And then we can talk a little bit about the rule.
Sure. It was really funny because when you first sort of landed in my world with your authenticity brand, I thought, wow, that feels really familiar, because my personal brand is trust plus gratitude. Like that's my thing is, and I use it in everything. But if I look at it literally in the world that I work in terms of fundraising, I think of it in the context of trust that we will do with your money what we said we would do, and that we will express appropriate gratitude for how you made us forward. Mm-hmm. And so that's all about authenticity. And what's probably one of the most flattering things that I experience is when someone says to me, well, the reason we work with you is you bring so much authenticity and you're so authentic.
Mm.
You know, we know where you're coming from. Even when we're coming from different directions, you tell us that's what's going on. Or that, this is the roadblock that you either can get past, but we have to work through, or we can't get past because it's institutional, or, I'm at a public university. You're required to adhere to the laws of the state of New York. I can't change some things unless I can motivate people to vote to change laws it's so far beyond my day to day. So when you sort of came into my world with this authenticity brand, it was lockstep with me.
Mm.
And then when you introduced this concept of the 50% rule, was like, oh, wait, we are of the same tribe. We're in the same lane 90% of the time. Well, maybe 50% of the time.
I love it. Let's go back before we get into the 50% rule. When you said, I'm in the business sort of trust and giving, trust,
Gratitude.
gratitude. Sorry. And, contextually, your primary thing is working with donors. What tangibly does that look like? How do you make trust one of your center two principles, and how does that help you succeed? What's that look like for Michelle?
So most of what I do on a day-to-day basis today is writing grants or working with faculty members who are writing grants to request funding to make dreams come true. I say a lot that the thing that I do every day is I connect people who want to change the world with those who can. Like I can say to you, I'd like to cure cancer, and I can introduce you, within the next 30 minutes to someone who's working on that challenge. And I was talking to a colleague today, and he talked about the fact that, this is the joy part of the business. Higher education is about hope and joy and trying to make something positive happen. But in its most literal way, I have to be able to answer questions about who we are and how that aligns to your mission. What my institution is, my charity is, in alignment with your mission and goals, because the IRS says you have to follow the laws framed by your mission. And so you have to trust me that when I say to you, here's where we intersect, that it's a truth. I have to be nimble enough to figure that out, that where that lane is. I have to use language that when put into a contract, at the craft language, that when put into a contract, will actually be something we can deliver upon, both that meets your mission and meets what you can do. And so trust in its literal way is spinning a dream that has tangible outcomes that the IRS, your auditor, and my auditor will all agree are true. And so it's like it's that game.
Yeah, it's like the Venn diagram. But so I'm curious, do you give us an example of a time you were working with a potential donor? Maybe it was a skeptic, somebody that, you didn't think you could get on board. And how did you sort of enable this whole trust Venn diagram for them? Because I think for our listeners, they may not be in the same industry, but they're constantly having to influence people to do something, whether it's internally, it's sales, et cetera. Like, does a time come to mind where you're like, this epitomizes how I believe I should be doing things?
So an example I will give is working with an extraordinary partner we have at the university who is often a partner. Like they're someone who comes to the table with us regularly. But the challenge that they gave to us was, tell me a project that is new and interesting, that meets our ability to impact, that's a capital project. And it's something that we haven't done before. And we were creating a brand new program within our School of Nursing for speech language pathology. And so the speech language pathology world was a new degree discipline for us. And there are rules that lead to accreditation. So we didn't exist. And we can't tell you how many students we're going to recruit. And you want it to have a local impact. And so then we had to come back and say, I know what the donor wants to achieve. The donor wants a local impact. And if we're building a program that's recruiting students from all over the state or the nation or the world, how's that local? Because they're going to go back home to have a job. And so I worked with the faculty members to figure out how could we, even if they all left, how could we find a way that those students would be impactful in the here and the now? And that came into being with a local clinic because our students are required to have clinical experience. So we needed to have clinical opportunities. And there wasn't an infrastructure. There isn't an infrastructure in our community to do that. And so we created a model that said, okay, and it wasn't for the donor. It was the donor was challenging us to think about what we had to achieve. So we weren't going off and selling our soul to get some gift. We were saying the donor was challenging us to think about, a point on the map, and it prompted us to think about a different point on the map, and our problems met in the middle. It ended up creating as part of the as an educational output, students have to have an experience that is clinical as part of their training to be speech language pathologists. We had to have a clinical environment. We don't have a clinical environment. We then had to create a clinical environment. That clinical environment serves local finding people in our community by giving them access to something that they probably couldn't have gotten without going, a 2-day trip to another city. Going, we have a problem here, and this is really finite, but we have a problem with swallowing technologies that if you've had a stroke, it's often difficult to swallow. And one of the local care providers that we were referring people to in this region for healthcare service was in Baltimore. Well, first of all, that's a 6-hour drive. And second of all, if you are coming from poverty, you might not even be able to take the 2 days off. Forget the 6-hour drive. Forget, we were looking at, is it on the busway? Can we get care busway? And then we looked at, that challenge that the donor gave us then prompted us to look at, where would we locate this space? And we ended up doing a significant renovation to a brand new space to bring a clinic into our community that will serve people every single day and gets our educational outcome and makes the donor impact local people in a way no one can. So it's weird like that, if that helps.
No, I love that. I mean, I think so many people, if you had that situation where a donor was like, well, but, the first reaction to most people would be, first of all, like over wine that night to their friends, to their spouse, whatever, complaining about what a pita they were and how, but instead, what you're saying is it's such a catalyst. You have sort of this mindset that like it's a catalyst first to potentially do things that aren't just good because they're good on paper and to meet their sort of obligations and whatever, but actually to make you guys better and to find a win-win solution. So I think it's such a great story and people can sort of process that within the context of the things they deal with. I mean, I've always, I came from a corporation where our clients were our biggest clients were our biggest R&D. They sort of like, but I think we often, if it felt a lot like a pressure cooker to do it because they wanted it. And then after the fact, it was like, okay, now how do we productize this for everybody else? So it wasn't just, so I love that mindset. And I can see how that builds trust because you're essentially saying like, let's find a win-win solution, to both what you need to do and what we need to do and it's work to do it.
Precise, Erin. It's a very specific intersection because you were talking about can be, we need to solve a problem for a partner. That's a problem. That's not a grant. That's not a gift. That's not a donation. That's a contract we enter into that has an outcome that is driven to success. And you could even say in a contract model, if we're not successful, you don't have to pay me. But in the world of philanthropy, it's about hope. It is about try. It's about trying. And you're going to, sometimes people talk about it as making an investment, but it's making an investment in a social fabric and the community or the nation or your environment. You are committing that there's an outcome that is worthy, even if it is not a product that I need to solve my problem. you are doing something for the common good. And so that gives me a lot of latitude. I'm fortunate. I have a counterpart on campus where if you land in the place and you say, no, what I really want is I want you to deliver this service to my company on these days, I can say, great. We've got a whole organization here in the state of New York that will do that for you as a contract opportunity. And you might even be working with the same faculty member that I had in the Dream Big land, but you're purchasing something. And on that's not as exciting to me. I like the hope and dream and trust and we'll be wildly grateful. And I've got millions of students who are going to come to the table to say, and a good example of this is a neighbor of yours-ish, the folks in an energy provider in our shared region who provides support to have students do research, do projects as part of their capstone experience that's in the lane of energy or the environment. Because it's a donation and not a purchase, they can't tell the students what to do. So the students come up with these crazy ideas. They've got a hydrogen bike and they've got solar powered laptops and they've got, they're dreaming big and they will remember that moment and that donor and that impact for the rest of their lives. So it's a lot of fun.
Yeah.
It's all
Yeah.
good.
That's amazing. I love it.
Hey guys, Erin here, and I have some exciting news. So I have been working on my second book, The 50% Rule, for the last few years, and it's now available for pre-order. Here's the truth. I am totally obsessed with this book. And the reasons are, first, because of the rule. The rule completely has changed my life. I use it on freaking everything. And I've used it helping countless others. So the rule is tested. It is powerful. I've been using it for 5 years. But honestly, that probably wouldn't have been enough to write a book about it. It would have gotten kind of boring. What actually happened is over the last couple of years, what I started to see was that this rule was actually the secret, the backbone, the formula for so many people's success, like famous people and things and companies like Hamilton and John Madden and Weird Al Yankovic and the Savannah Bananas and Shopify and all these. And so what happened is I realized that this rule isn't just, a self-help rule to get over your problems, which is where it started, but it's actually the thing that can help you go from underdog to unmatched. And I've seen it with many others. So I tell a bazillion stories in there. There's advice, there's research, there's, of course, snarky wit, and a little salty language, of course. I'd say it's sort of like a Malcolm Gladwell meets Jen Sincero book. So to get your copy of the 50% Rule, so you don't forget, I know it's kind of weird, pre-order, but you can do that now. You can just head over to Amazon and look for the 50% Rule, or you can check it out in the show notes below. Can't wait to share the rule with you.
So you saw my message, it aligned. I put out a crazy note where I was looking for like 20 volunteers to work on the book. I think I got like 70 people that volunteered. Tell us a little bit about what you thought you were getting into and what you actually sort of got out of maybe this 50% rule group that's been meeting for the last year and a half.
But I had no idea what I was getting into. It was a crazy idea. And it was one of those, I knew someone who you knew and intercepted. And this call was like, yes, I want to be part of that. Even though I don't know what it is, I'd like to be in that box that is only 50% built or maybe 25% concede and
right.
Only 50% built. But it appealed to me as a place where I could meet people who were outside of my world and get new ideas and get, that combination of being part of something bigger than me.
And you're in it. You're in it.
I love that. I think one of the challenge I frequently have finished a team because I'm working with people who will never get to a destination. Like when you think about curing cancer, we're not going to cure cancer. We're not going to cure because we don't need to cure all cancers. You have 37 billion trillion cells. Every one of them technically can have that, which is defined by cancer. We're really only worried about the ones that kill you faster than living will, or make your life miserable on the way to a normal, healthy, long life. But when you're in a long vein, having something that is like, this has a start and a finish, and in the middle, it's going to be creative and exciting. This very appealing.
Yeah.
And I got that out of it.
Yeah, I love it. Now, tell us, it's funny because the 50% rule, it's so stinking simple. And it also morphs, right? And I was once taught the communication is the response you get back. So how do you define the 50% rule, and how has it sort of changed maybe how you've done your thing?
So I like it. At some point you explained it as 50% normal and 50% new, which I really like. Like it. But in my rule, we have a lot of churn. We have a lot of change. Gift officers, fundraisers, we're a hot commodity. Everybody wants to have one. And so there's a lot of change that goes on. We have leadership shifts all the time. And so the thing that's hardest for us or for me, is to remember that 50% of what you did was not garbage. 50% of it might have been garbage. The person who came behind me, like, when you go and sit in someone else's chair and you're suddenly doing their job and you're like, what were they thinking? If the first instinct is to throw every single leg. And then you have to realize that, no, it wasn't, somebody invented the wheel. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. And I think I use that every day, is figure out what worked before you parse out everything, just because the thing that's surfacing is the thing that doesn't, right? So it's like an iceberg. For me, that 50% rule is like an iceberg, except for that which you see is probably not, the problem is probably not even 50%, but it seems like 100% because it's right there in your face and way down. And so taking that deep breath is really important. I used to, all the time, people would say to me, they would complain about people. Like you would run into someone in the community, they go, that back of them would, and you would say, like, that's my mother. And they would go like, oh my God, no, I don't mean she was like, she was just really difficult and it was hard and I had to learn. And no, I don't really mean to hate her. And then I would stop and say, you also know I'm not married, right?
I gotcha.
Just messing with you. People so easily lean into that. It's got to be different. I've got to put my stamp on it. And what you have to remember, and what the 50% rule has reminded me, is that I have to springboard where we are to the next place. And if every single time I tear down the scaffolding and start from zero, I'm never going to get past the halfway point.
Yeah.
I have to build on the foundation that someone came before me. And that's how I get better. And that's how we get better.
I think what's interesting, so Michelle, like when we first started talking about the 50% rule and this concept of, throw out half and bring in your own stuff. And so many of us, including myself, were so focused on, get rid of half and bring in the other. And Michelle was like, time out. I work in academia. I work in particular with a lot of students too. They have the opposite problem. They don't want to keep anything. They want to throw 100% out. And it's actually what inspired the chapter to don't throw the baby out with the hot tub water, because honestly was seeing it. And I think your perspective that some people are afraid to bring in their own stuff, but then there's also some people that, like you said, they see the iceberg, they see the problem and assume that everything under the water is related to the problem and they should throw out the whole damn, piece of ice. And the truth is you got to keep some. And so I loved, you brought that sort of unique perspective. So let me ask you this, really simple concept. I mean, a lot of people say to me when I explain it, they're like, oh yeah, I do that. And then my response usually is, yeah, but you don't, right? And what I'm being a little bit flippant in that you do it in some aspects of your life, but I can tell you with certainty, since I literally wrote the book on it. And while I was writing the book, I was still stuck on stuff that I finally realized I should 50% rule it. Right. And so I guess from your perspective, simple rule, but why do you think people might need to read, 250 pages to actually, versus like listen to this podcast or read a meme, or maybe they don't. I mean, do you have a perspective on why a book?
It's why we hire consultants. Because I can tell myself something and it doesn't, no matter how many times I tell myself the same thing, it's not going to make it true. And I will use an example of like cleaning telling myself this weekend I'm going to clean my house is not going to make it happen. But I will tell you, I just need to watch one episode of Porters. Sorry.
The ultimate house cleaning consultant.
It's like, okay, that's it. Everything goes from this room. But, so there's power of someone outside of your world telling you something. First of all, full stop. It's the power of the consultant. It's why in our business, in fundraising, we are always bringing in someone outside to do a temperature check, a feasibility study, to say, this is what your world looks like. It doesn't matter if I tell my leadership something every single day. They will not believe me because they see me every single day. If somebody else tells them from outside, they'll believe it. And so that's like full stop. That's rule one of the book, but that's only half a good rule. But I would say the other piece of it is the way it's written, things that I should know, that I do know, that I don't hear myself, that I remind myself, were conveyed to me in a way that was both gentle and entertaining. And so, like when I read through the gallons, I was flagging, it felt like every page, and I thought, I'm going to run out of Post-it notes. But I'm reminding myself of good advice. There were exercises that were thoughtful, and there were moments that took me out of my own head and made me sort of sink in and deep dive into some of what you were talking about. Was I doing that? Did I see friends doing that? Was this something that someone in my family might be getting with pages underlined and flat?
Passive aggressive underlining.
I'm not saying you've got a problem, but if you haven't read this chapter,
But go to page 182 and there.
now I'm going to have to look and see what's on 182.
I have no idea.
So why do you need this book? You don't need any book. You don't need, we can all bumble through life, but this makes some of the voices in your head make more sense. When you're having that moment, when you're in a new role or when your role changes and you are in that moment feeling like you are the biggest mistake your employer has ever made because you're not going to do this well. Having an ability to step out and realize that's your own negative. They did hire you not to be the person who was here before, but to be you plus, to be that person plus you. Those moments are really their power. And you conveyed them in a way that was entertaining and amusing and it was fun.
Oh, thank you. I think the other thing that I'm excited about that this book has that maybe the first book doesn't have quite as much, it's this nomenclature. I mean, my first book has humans and you can do that, but my dream is that, I walk around and hear people saying to them, just 50% rule it, right? There's just like, there's something crazy fast hack shortcut. And so I think it's what my hope is. And I think it's one of those books that you'll not just want to read, but you want other people around you to read so that you can say, why don't you just 50% rule it? And they don't have to look at you with two heads and you have to explain it. But you, I remember you were saying on one of our calls that you did that, I think to your boss or to one of the deans. And how, I'm curious, how was that received? Did he look at you with like, you had three heads or?
Well, a little bit, but recognize that in the academy, we always assume that there's a hidden vocabulary that I just missed. And so you have to quickly follow, it's the 50% rule with, we're just going to throw half of this idea away and we're going to move forward from here. Or we know that we're going to lose 50% of the market and that's okay because in this, we're spreading our wings and trying something new. As long as you follow quickly with an explanation until you become ubiquitous.
Yeah.
I think the other thing, frankly, about the 50% rule is as a vocabulary, it doesn't seem that hard, right? Because I can get a halfway pass, like I can pass, right? I can get by. And so if you tell me I have to change 100% of what I'm doing in my job, there's no way in hell. Like, it's just like, that is too big of a mountain. I cannot do that. Feel free to check in with me during the break we have scheduled in 2032. Or if you say to me, we just got to get it half right or half different, or 50% rule this part of it, it suddenly becomes like a bite size, and it's like, oh yeah, I can do half of this differently. I don't have to change everything. And so I think it's like half the calories, right? It's a half diet. It only hurts half as much.
You're like half the calories and tastes just as good, right? And we're in this society of I gave 110% or, productivity hacks and grinding it out. I think that's what I love the most about this is I feel like it's a formula that makes you do great things without maybe not working half as much. That's not the literal expectation of the 50% rule, but not working quite as hard and getting to do great things because you're doing them a little differently.
Well, and I think it's, we're still working as hard, but it's not as duplicative, and it's not as much like Lewis and Clark. It's more Rand McNally. Like, you don't have to start every single time and say, okay, I'd like to go to Philadelphia. I wonder where that is.
Right.
Somebody found Philadelphia.
Right.
And I can get to Philadelphia, and I might not get there the same way you get there, but that's okay. If it's on some level, I think, Erin, it's the intentionality of it, right? It's the idea of you have permissioned me to bring 50% of myself to the table, but you have also permissioned me to borrow 50% from the people who came before me, or the rules that surround me, or as you mentioned earlier, the tax law that encumbers me. I can read something that says, insert your mission here. You have 150 words. And the 50% rule allows me to, wrest the mission away from an academic or an engineer and say, let's put the feeling and not just the, 75 characters that you wrote that say what we do in a big picture, but don't convey the joy. And so that to me it's the ability to sort of take the map away from the person who's holding it upside down and say, okay, let's start with turn the map right side up and go to a place that we agree is wonderful or better or different or whatever.
I love that. Last question. What is the thing that is most memorable that you've 50% ruled in the last year and a half since we started this venture together?
I would say in a very now context, we as a team are presenting to leadership this week, and we were given a template for how to respond, and the template had a series of each page had certain content we were supposed to put on it, and I looked at the template and I said, that doesn't relate to my job. It's a great template. And I'm going to, and I'm comfortable being the person who walks into that room and says, yeah, I'm presenting to you differently than the 8 people who came before me in this 90-minute presentation. They each get 10 minutes. I'm going to present differently because my world is different than these. And I have kept the framework, and I have kept many of the themes. And so I've kept some of the structure, but I am putting my stamp on it, and I don't feel apologetic. And for the first time in a very long time, I did not send it to my supervisor in an implied request for permission.
Yeah.
Just say, like, is this okay? It's a little bit different. No, this is how I'm going to present it. I'll submit it.
I think everybody listening can totally relate, especially if you've been in corporate America or in large institutions like you are. And I think you said it before me. It's really about what is the intent, like stepping back on anything you're doing. Like, so you looked at that and said, okay, I know they put together a template, but what is their intent? What do they want out of the meeting? Is it educational? Is it alignment? Whatever. And how can I give them that by 50%, what they asked for, and 50% what's truly needed, right? And that's one of my favorite phrases in the book, focus on what's needed, not what's normal. And I love that example because who hasn't been faced with the template? And I laugh, right? Like our immediate instinct too is like, mother may I, and where in the hell did we get taught? Well, I know where we got taught unfortunately in academics, right? Because there's always a rubric and a test and you have to do it just right, like the rules, and deprogramming ourselves from those rubrics and those rules and not only changing it, but I think what you said is really important, not feeling like crap or nervous or apologetic, because that energy not only is no fun for us, but it spreads to others. And if we can walk in with that confidence, then other people will go, oh, look at her. She didn't have any problem slapping this thing around that didn't totally make sense. So I love that. Where can people connect with you if they want to learn more about Michelle Gardner?
The best place is probably through Binghamton University. So M. Gardner at binghamton.edu, or through LinkedIn. But I will admit I'm not on LinkedIn every single day. I am there probably once a week, but I'm Michelle L. Gardner in most of my life. My family was rich with content.
Oh, I love it. Yeah. And I know when you show up, like, it's great. It's like, oh, there's Michelle. She's liked and commented on like 3 posts and then she's gone. So it's okay that you're not a LinkedIn loser like me and they're, every day, sometimes 6 times. But thank you so much, very sincerely, for your input. I mean, this group you're absolutely right. I went into it probably less than 25%. I just knew that I didn't want to write this book in a vacuum, and I didn't know what I didn't know. And it would be so much better, richer with your feedback and your real-time input. And we've had so much fun. And we spend half the meetings catching on crap that has nothing to do with the 50% rule. And it's just been a real honor to meet you and work with the whole group. So thank you again.
It's been a blast. And I'm thrilled to be here for part of it, and it can meet you for the next book. I'm here.
I love it.
Hey, it's Erin with a teeny request. If you have ever gotten any value from this podcast and you'd like us to stick around, plus you want it to continue to grow so we can kind of swindle bigger and more knowledgeable guests to join us, and to keep providing you with tangible and inspiring actions you can take to achieve the career and life you deserve, could you please just take 1 minute to leave us a rating and a review? Those reviews go a long way in attracting guests to the show, and candidly, they really make Nicole and I's day. We see you. We really do. So when you have the time and inspiration, we'd love to see a rating and review from you. Thank you.